My name is Nancy V. Kaufman. I'm 30 years old and I work in commercial HVAC installation. I've been renting the same two-bedroom apartment for 3 years now. It's nothing fancy, just a clean place in a decent part of town, close to job sites, and within walking distance of a grocery store. I pay my bills on time, keep my space organized, and I like knowing exactly what my monthly expenses look like. My boyfriend Derek is 27. We've been together just under 2 years, and he moved into my apartment about 8 months ago. His name isn't on the lease. We agreed he'd transfer me half the rent and utilities each month. At least that was the agreement. For the first couple months, it worked fine. Then his payments started getting late. Not wildly late, but always with a story attached. His manager cut his hours. His car insurance jumped unexpectedly. He had to help his sister with something. It was always temporary, always just until next month. I covered the gaps because I could. I make steady money. Overtime is always available. I didn't want to nickel and dime someone I cared about. The bigger issue wasn't the money. It was the attitude. Derek has this way of talking during arguments that turns everything into a power play. If I brought up rent being late, he'd roll his eyes and say I was acting like his landlord instead of his girlfriend. If I asked him to give me a heads up before inviting friends over, he'd say it wasn't just my place anymore. But technically, it was. The blow-up happened on a Tuesday night. I had just gotten home from a 10-hour install, covered in insulation dust, and opened my email to see that our internet auto payment had bounced again. Derek had switched the payment method to his card 2 months earlier to prove he was contributing more. When I asked him about it, he didn't apologize. He laughed. "You're so dramatic. It's just Wi-Fi." I told him it wasn't about Wi-Fi. It was about reliability. That's when he crossed the line. "If you're so unhappy, fine. Go find someone else." He said it casually, like he was daring me. There was a moment of silence where I could have argued back. I could have tried to calm things down. Instead, I looked at him and said something I hadn't even planned. "Already taken care of." His smirk faded for half a second. Then he scoffed like I was bluffing. I wasn't. What Derek didn't know was that 3 weeks earlier, after the third late rent transfer, I had quietly started making contingency plans. I didn't announce it. I didn't threaten him. I didn't stage some dramatic conversation where I begged him to change. I just noticed a pattern and began preparing for the end of it. Here's what pushed me over the edge. That third late transfer came with a Venmo caption that said, "Don't be mad, LOL." It wasn't the money. It was the disrespect hiding inside the joke. Like my stress was cute. Like my responsibility was optional, as long as he smiled. That same week, I ran into an old friend from trade school named Maya. She's 31, works a steady job with the city water department, and she had this exhausted look that told me she was carrying something heavy. We grabbed a quick coffee and caught up. She mentioned she had just gone through a breakup and needed a place fast because her ex was keeping their apartment. At the time, I didn't say much. I just listened. But that night, after Derek's late payment and that little LOL that made my stomach tighten, something shifted in me. Not rage, not heartbreak, just detachment, the kind that feels like you finally stop arguing with reality. So the next morning, I went to the leasing office. I asked what my options were if I wanted to renew early under a new roommate agreement when my lease ended in 6 weeks. They told me it wouldn't be an issue since I was the primary leaseholder. Background check, paperwork, standard process. Simple? I didn't tell Derek any of that. I just started paying closer attention. Every time he'd say, "This is our place now," I'd mentally note that he had never once spoken to the leasing office. He had never once handled utilities without something bouncing. He had never once taken responsibility without flipping it back on me. If I asked about rent, he'd say I was treating him like a tenant. If I asked about bills, he'd say I was obsessed with money. If I asked for basic respect, he'd say I was controlling. Meanwhile, the rent still hit my account every month. The utilities still had my name on them. The lease still had my signature. He was living in stability he hadn't earned, and resenting me for requiring it. When he threw out, "Fine, go find someone else," he thought it was just another emotional grenade he could toss without consequences. He didn't realize I had already detached emotionally weeks ago. After I said, "already taken care of," he laughed and asked what that was supposed to mean. I shrugged. "It means I don't make threats, I make adjustments." He rolled his eyes and went back to scrolling on his phone like the conversation was over. It wasn't. The next morning I texted Maya, "Are you still looking for a place?" She replied in under 2 minutes. "Yes, desperately." By that afternoon, I emailed the leasing office confirming I'd be renewing and adding a new roommate starting next month. They sent over the forms. I filled them out at work during lunch, sitting in my truck between job sites, signing my name with a steady hand. Meanwhile, Derek was still posting on Instagram from our couch like nothing had shifted. He had no idea he had just volunteered himself out of the apartment. Once the paperwork started moving, I kept everything normal on the surface. I didn't argue with him. I didn't bring up money again. I didn't react when he made comments like, maybe I'll just move somewhere nicer if this place is so stressful for you. He thought he was still holding leverage. The lease renewal date was 6 weeks out. Maya passed the background check in 3 days. Solid income, no issues. The leasing office emailed me the updated documents and I signed digitally that same afternoon. The new lease would start the 1st of next month. Only my name and Maya's. Derek still had no idea. He assumed when he said, "Go find someone else," I'd either get defensive or apologize. That was usually how it went. He'd escalate, I'd stabilize, and we'd reset without actually fixing anything. But this time, I stopped stabilizing. 3 days after that argument, our streaming subscriptions auto-renewed. Every single one of them was under my card. Netflix, Hulu, the family Spotify plan, and 2 random premium channels Derek insisted on for one specific show he barely watched. I logged into each account and canceled everything except my personal Spotify. No announcement. Just confirmation emails. That night, he tried to turn on one of his shows. The screen prompted for payment. "Did you forget to pay this?" he called from the bedroom. "No," I said from the kitchen. "I canceled it." He walked out slowly, like I'd just insulted him. "Why?" "Because I'm tightening expenses." He stared at me. "Over $20. "It's not about $20. That phrase again. He crossed his arms. "You're being petty." I didn't argue. I went back to wiping down the counter. That was the first time I saw it register on his face. Not panic, not yet. Just discomfort. The ground wasn't shifting dramatically, but it was shifting. 2 days later, I gave him a practical heads up. "Lease renewal's coming up. I'm restructuring some things next month." He didn't even look up from his phone. "Cool, just make sure the rent doesn't go up." I nodded. "It won't for me." He smirked like I had made a bad joke. The irony was that he'd still believed this was a standoff he could win. He had no idea his name wasn't anywhere on the new paperwork. He definitely had no idea who would be walking through that door on moving day. About 2 weeks before the lease officially rolled over, his tone changed. Not softer, sharper. "Did you already sign the renewal?" he asked one night, too casually. "Yeah." He nodded slowly. "And I'm still on it, right?" That was the first time he directly referenced the lease. I looked at him and said, "The paperwork's handled." That answer irritated him more than a yes or no would have. What does that even mean? It means I took care of it. He hated when I spoke in calm, short sentences. It gave him nothing to push against. The money situation didn't improve either. His half of the rent that month came in 8 days late. When I reminded him, he sighed dramatically and said, "You act like I'm trying to screw you over." I didn't respond, because by that point, I wasn't worried about being screwed over. I was already exiting. 3 days before move-in day for the new lease, I texted Maya. "You good for Saturday morning?" She replied with a thumbs up and said she had rented a small U-Haul. That night, Derek announced he was planning a small get-together the following weekend. "Just a few friends, nothing crazy." "That won't work," I said. He looked up. "Why not?" "Because the living arrangement changes Saturday." He blinked. "What changes?" That was when I finally said it plainly. "You're not on the new lease." Silence. Not dramatic, just heavy processing silence. He actually laughed at first. "Okay, so what does that mean?" "It means your move-out date is Friday." The smile dropped. "You're joking." I shook my head. "You told me to find someone else." I did. He stood up so fast his chair scraped across the floor. "You can't just kick me out." I didn't raise my voice. "You're not on the lease. I gave you notice." "Right. This is insane," he snapped. "You're choosing some random person over your boyfriend. I'm choosing stability over chaos." That hit him harder than yelling would have. "Oh? You think you're going to be happier with some boring roommate," he shot back. I didn't smile, but I almost did, because the roommate wasn't the part that was going to bother him most. The part that would really get to him hadn't happened yet. The next 48 hours were exactly what you'd expect. First, disbelief. "You're overreacting. This is just you trying to scare me." Then anger. "You're seriously throwing away 2 years over rent and Wi-Fi." Then guilt. "After everything I've done for you." I stayed consistent through all of it. "You told me to find someone else. I handled it." That phrase drove him insane. He started calling his friends loudly in the living room, making sure I could hear his side of the story. "She's being dramatic. She's choosing a roommate over me. Can she even do that?" Yes, I could. And he knew it. By Thursday night, he finally shifted into negotiation mode. "Fine, I'll just pay more. I'll cover utilities fully. We can redo the lease together." That was the first time he offered actual accountability. It was also too late. The issue was never just money. It was the constant disrespect, the casual ultimatums, the way he'd toss threats during arguments like they were harmless. "I already signed," I said calmly. "It's finalized." His jaw tightened. "So who is it?" "Maya," he scoffed. "Great, a boring city worker." "That's not the part that matters," I said. "What does that mean?" I didn't answer, because Saturday morning was going to answer it for me. Friday came, and he packed slower than necessary, clearly expecting me to cave at the last minute. He hovered, making comments like, "You're going to regret this," and "Good luck with your little structured life." I didn't argue. I carried one of his boxes to his car, not out of kindness, out of efficiency. When he drove off, he didn't slam the door. He didn't cry. He looked irritated, like he still believed this was temporary. Saturday morning at 9, Maya pulled up with the U-Haul. And she wasn't alone. When Maya pulled up Saturday morning, she wasn't alone. Her younger brother Caleb was with her, helping carry boxes. He's 29, works in physical therapy, calm energy, quiet confidence. I had met him once at a barbecue years ago. He wasn't dramatic, wasn't loud, just steady. He shook my hand, smiled politely, and immediately grabbed the heavier furniture without making it a spectacle. Let me be clear. I wasn't secretly dating him. There was no romantic reveal planned. He was just helping his sister move. But optics matter. Around 11, Derek walked back into the apartment without knocking. He said he forgot his toolbox, but the timing felt intentional. He stepped inside and froze. Maya was carrying a lamp into the spare bedroom. Caleb was in the kitchen laughing at something she said while unpacking dishes. The air shifted instantly. Derek's eyes locked onto Caleb. "Who's that?" he asked, tone sharp. I answered evenly. "Maya's brother. He's helping her move." Derek looked between them like he was trying to solve a math problem. "So you just moved another guy in immediately?" Caleb paused mid-step, confused. Hi, I'm Caleb." Derek ignored him. "You couldn't even wait a week." That's when it clicked for me. He wasn't upset about the lease. He wasn't upset about the breakup. He was upset that he didn't control the transition. I kept my voice calm. "You told me to find someone else. I found reliable roommates." He laughed sharply. "Oh, please, this is revenge." "No," I said, "this is restructuring." He hated that word. He scanned the apartment. The couch had already been repositioned. The coffee table cleared of his gaming magazines. The hallway shelf no longer had his loose change bowl on it. The Wi-Fi account had only my name again. It looked different. Intentional. Stable. He grabbed his toolbox from the closet but didn't leave. He stepped closer to me and lowered his voice. "Is this your way of making me jealous?" "No." He glanced at Caleb again. Caleb wasn't posturing. He wasn't flirting. He was just there. Present. Useful. Calm. That might have made it worse. "You really think this is better?" Derek asked. "Yes," I said honestly. "It's peaceful." That word landed harder than any insult could have. Peaceful meant something our relationship hadn't been for a long time. He picked up the toolbox and headed toward the door. Then he paused, turned back and said, "You're going to regret throwing away someone who actually cared about you." I didn't react, because caring doesn't look like bounced payments and emotional ultimatums. He left. The apartment felt different after that Saturday. Not louder, not chaotic, structured. Maya labeled her boxes, paid her share before I even asked. Caleb stayed for a couple hours helping set up the desk in the spare room, then left with a polite nod and a nice place. No tension, no power games. For the first time in months, my apartment felt like mine again. But Derek wasn't done. 3 days later, he texted at 11:42 p.m. "So you just moved on immediately." I didn't respond. 10 minutes later, "Is he staying long-term?" Still didn't respond. The next morning, I sent one message. "Maya is long-term. Caleb was helping. Lease is finalized." He replied, "Wow, cold." I stared at that for a moment. Cold would have been blindsiding him without notice. I gave him a move-out date. I kept it calm. I didn't drag it out. But from his perspective, I wasn't supposed to actually act. Later that week, he showed up again unannounced. This time, Maya opened the door before I could. "Oh, hey," she said awkwardly. "I need to grab something," Derek said, stepping inside like he still lived there. He walked slowly through the apartment, eyes scanning everything. The couch was different. The energy was different. He stopped in the kitchen where Maya was reviewing paperwork. "So how long are you staying?" he asked her. "Until the lease ends," she replied calmly. He forced a smile. "Must be nice getting a free place handed to you." "She's paying her share," I said evenly. His jaw tightened. Then he looked at me directly. "You really think this is better?" "It's stable," I said. He stared at me like he was trying to provoke something. "You've changed." "No," I replied. "I stopped stabilizing you." That landed. He left without another word. And that was when I realized something important. He thought he was testing me when he said, "Fine, go find someone else." But I wasn't the one being tested. He was, and he failed. After the second drop in, I understood something clearly. As long as I kept responding, Derek would keep circling back. It wasn't about the apartment anymore. It was about access. Access to me. Access to the space. Access to the version of stability he assumed would always be available. 2 nights later, he texted again. "Miss talking to you." I didn't answer. 10 minutes later. "Are you seriously just done?" I was sitting at the kitchen table when that message came through. Maya was across from me, reviewing her budget spreadsheet. Rent for next month already transferred. Utilities split cleanly, no captions, no jokes. The contrast hit me hard. No drama, no ultimatums, no eye rolls when bills came up. Just adults handling logistics. That was the moment I decided to close the door properly. I typed one message. "This isn't productive anymore. I'm moving forward. I need you to respect that." He replied within seconds. "So that's it, after everything." I didn't answer. Instead, I went into my phone settings and blocked his number. Instagram blocked. Snapchat blocked. Venmo removed. It wasn't emotional. It was administrative. Maya looked up when I set my phone down. "You good?" "Yeah," I said. "Just cleaning up loose ends." The silence in the apartment felt solid, not tense, settled. The next day, a mutual friend texted me. "Derek says you shut him out unfairly." I replied once. "There's nothing left to discuss." Then I muted the thread. 2 days later, there was a knock at the door. I checked through the peephole. "Derek." I didn't open it. He knocked again. Then my phone buzzed with a message from Maya. He had gotten her number from an old group chat and asked her to tell me to stop being immature. She showed me the message and raised an eyebrow. "It's handled," I said. She blocked him too. Through the door, I heard him mutter something about how I'd never find someone who tolerated me the way he did. That sentence stayed with me. Tolerated. That's what he thought he had been doing. The truth was the opposite. I had tolerated him. From that point on, there was zero access. No texts, no drop-ins, no forgotten items. Just silence. About a week later, a friend named Tyler texted me. "So, you moved on fast." I shrugged to myself before replying. I moved on deliberately. There's a difference. The shift wasn't romantic at first. It was internal. When Maya settled in, we rearranged the apartment again. We turned the spare corner into a shared workspace. She brought in a proper desk. I put my drafting table near the window. It felt like forward movement. Caleb came by occasionally to pick her up or drop something off. We'd exchange polite conversation. Nothing loaded. No tension. One Saturday morning, I ran into him at the gym. He nodded. "Place working out okay?" "Yeah," I said. "It's peaceful." He smiled like that meant something. We ended up grabbing coffee after the workout. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't a revenge play. It was easy. No power games, no subtle threats disguised as jokes. Just conversation. 3 weeks after I blocked Derek, Maya and I hosted a small housewarming. Nothing wild. Just a few friends, food, music low enough to talk. Caleb came by. At some point, someone tagged me in a group photo. It wasn't posed. It wasn't romantic. Just people laughing in a living room that used to feel tense. By morning, I had 3 missed calls from an unknown number and 1 voicemail. It was Derek. "So this is what you meant by already taken care of." There it was. Not anger, not threats. Realization. Because it wasn't about Maya. It wasn't even about Caleb. It was about the fact that I didn't spiral. I didn't beg. I didn't destabilize. I adjusted. I didn't call him back. Not to punish him. There was just nothing left to say. A week later, I ran into one of his friends at the grocery store. "So you moved on fast," she said. "I moved on consistently," I replied. Here's what I realized. When Derek said, "Fine, go find someone else," he assumed I would hesitate. He assumed I needed the relationship more than I needed stability. He assumed I would scramble to keep him. Instead, I audited my life. I removed shared subscriptions. I replaced unreliable rent contributions. I restructured my living space. I blocked unnecessary communication. And when something healthier showed up naturally, I didn't sabotage it to prove a point. Caleb and I are taking it slow. No big announcements, no social media declarations, just consistent time together, clear communication, no power plays. The most ironic part, Derek used to say, "No one will put up with you being so serious about money and responsibility." Turns out the right person doesn't feel like they're putting up with you. They feel aligned. The apartment is calm now. Rent is on time. The lights stay on. No casual ultimatums tossed during arguments. And I don't smile about it in a petty way. I smile because I don't feel tested anymore. When someone says, go find someone else, you have two options: argue or listen. I listened. And by the time he realized I meant it, the lease was signed, the subscriptions were canceled, the door was closed, and I was already building something quieter. Sometimes moving on isn't loud. It's administrative and final.